So, hi everybody, welcome to our webinar today titled What are the Top Governance Challenges Facing Boards in 2026? What's Really Making You Sweat? So, we're joined today by Jeremy Foster and Julie Garland Mclellan in this webinar, which is going to be quite different from our usual format, in that you will be driving the agenda and the conversation. Intrigued? Well, stand by and everything will be revealed shortly. My name's Sean McDonald, and I shall be your moderator for the next 45 odd minutes. Firstly, thank you so much for attending today. We always appreciate the effort you make to be here for our live events, particularly with daylight saving. We know it's been a bit tricky trying to sync up your calendars, so thanks again for making the effort. During the session, if you have any questions, which we hope you will do, please try and use the Q&A button on your toolbar. We'll be answering as many of these questions as we have time for. And finally, if you stay through till the end, which of course we hope you will do, and as is customary for our webinars, we have a special treat for you. By answering a really short 1-minute survey at the end of the webinar, you'll go into the draw to win one of our beautiful gift hampers worth over $300. Now, for those not too familiar with Board Pro, we are a board portal, a board software provider. Then we serve just about 34 odd thousand users across the world, and we're represented now in about 34 different countries. And we enable organizations to prepare for and run their board meetings more efficiently and effectively with less time and deliver more impact and value for the organization. And as much as we are a software provider or sometimes called a board portal, part of our wider mission is to make the fundamentals of governance free and easy to implement. And that's for all organizations, but especially those organizations with resource constraints. And one of the many ways we do this is by providing free access to hundreds of business templates, guides, and resources on our website, which you will find in the resources section of our website, funnily enough. And these webinars that we host every week are a great way of accessing key governance knowledge without the time commitment and costs associated with in-person events. So for the next 40 odd minutes, just relax and add to the discussion by asking as many questions as you would like. A full recording of the webinar along with the slide deck, not that there's much of a slide deck, and the transcript will be provided as well as the report from the session today, and I'll send that out to you tomorrow. So without further ado, let me hand over to our team, Jeremy and Julie, who will introduce themselves, starting with you first, Jeremy.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, or good evening, wherever this meeting finds you. I'm a chief catalyst for Peak Balance, a small boutique strategy company. The idea is calling myself a catalyst, is I think that the answers exist in the groups that I engage with. So I engage with boards and executive teams. Peak Balance is about achieving peak impact while balancing trade-offs. There's always trade-offs. And I won't tell you my life story. It's been epic and just enjoying coming and talking about governance issues, having recently finished the chartered membership for the Institute of Directors in New Zealand, which I've enjoyed doing.
Fantastic. Julie, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie. I am the managing director of a newsletter which is called The Director's Dilemma. I'm sure a few of you on this call will be readers, maybe even some contributors. If not, easy enough to find and subscribe. But I am a professional board member half the time and a consultant and advisor to boards the other half, and in my spare time I write a newsletter. And I'm really looking forward to this morning's event, or this afternoon's.
Indeed. Jeremy, back to you, sir.
All right, so everyone, if you thought that this was the session where you're going to kick back and relax and eat your lunch, this is not that session. It's time for you to jump into this presentation with us. And so what I'd like you to invite you all to do is grab your phone, please, and take a photo of the QR code, which is in the top right-hand corner, and that will parachute you into this session. And what we're going to do is we've crafted a number of different classic areas which drive challenges and We talked about when we were discussing building up the session, the unspeakable things, the real challenges. And so we're going to use this technique which I've developed called group wisdom, where you're all going to participate in it. That's then going to start yielding what's really important to you. And then as we then land on some of those vital things which are really driving, creating tension and challenges for us, we're going to lean on Julie's fantastic background and experience to talk through what are some ways of tackling these kind of issues. And so you can see already we've got 58 of you have parachuted into this call. As you think about the roles that you play, and Julia, just want your reflections. What are some of the differences as you think about, life of a CEO, a director, corporate secretary? What are some of the things that speak to you about these roles?
Um, I love the roles. I love to kid myself that I can have an impact and make a difference. And certainly being a director is one of those ways in which you can leverage your impact across more than one organization. Hopefully, I'm a good director and that's a positive thing. Sometimes the boards I work with, I scratch my head and wonder whether perhaps limiting people to just one area of impact might be a better solution. But CEOs, again, boards direct, but the CEOs actually make sure it happens. And I often joke with my CEOs that they don't really have a job. All they have to do is make sure everyone else does theirs. But that's a full-time job and then some. So CEO role, again, it's that focused impact. And company secretaries, I think both CEOs and directors would die without our company secretaries or our governance professionals, because, of course, in New Zealand, the title is less common because there's no legal requirement for certain companies to have one.
Right.
I'm reading a fantastic book at the moment called The Secret Diary of a Company Secretary. And for anyone who thinks that company secretarial work is boring, uh-uh, it's certainly pretty exciting in secret. Um, so here are the results. Look at that.
So it looks like we've got quite a lot of directors on the call, which is fantastic. Also, around about a third of us, and about 15% who are really bringing that kind of CEO perspective. We're going to box on, team, in the interest of time. One of the other interesting things that I notice, you can hear I'm a Kiwi, but I have spent 10 and a half years abroad. I lived in the Middle East for 6.5 years, in Sweden for 2.5 years, in the US for 18 months. What are your reflections, Julie? What are some of your international perspectives around Australia, New Zealand, or elsewhere? What'd you say?
Well, I'm an inveterate traveler. I love to travel and go to new places and meet new people. I think that's just one of the joys of the job. Um, Obviously, we've all chosen to be or to stay where we are. Um, and there are pros and cons with those decisions. But I just find that Australia and New Zealand, when you look at everywhere else in the world, they are such good places to be. The quality of life here, the ability, if you work hard and if you have a little bit of help, to have a good life is so much better than it is in some
Mm.
other areas. But really thinking through some of the big benefits of Australia, I love the compulsory voting. Having seen places overseas where 20% of the population decide on behalf of the other 80. I love the fact that we managed to have orderly transitions.
Yes.
Most boards, we have orderly elections. The corporate governance institutions and frameworks are good. The level of corruption is never acceptable, but it's much lower here than it is in some other places.
Mm.
And I genuinely find that company directors are focused on building their companies and trying to make them succeed.
So it looks like on this call, and we're now going to jump into the exciting stuff, but I think it's always interesting to get a sense of different perspectives. So we're roughly 50-50 split for Australia, New Zealand. So let's get into the chunky stuff. Now, this is what is called in group wisdom terms conditional branching. And the way this works is that you have three choices, and I should have added that little note, but you're going to have three votes. And so the way to use this particular slide is that all of these areas create challenges for boards. But what are the top most challenging ones for you? And so the way this works is if you can choose, so your first one could be around strategy, another one could be around artificial intelligence, technology outside of AI, so cybersecurity, those kind of things, Indigenous representation, all of these things are really important things. The first one will get a slightly heavier weight than the second and the third. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this group wisdom of this group that's now joining the session, and we're going to surface up where are the biggest challenges. And then what that's going to do is going to take us to those areas where we start to see, the kind of classic challenges that fit in strategy, the kind of classic challenges that fit in people and culture and so on. And there we're going to then select, well, of these kind of challenges, which are most challenging. And then Julie's going to share some short anecdotes on, here's some ways that we've seen how we might tackle such things. The demographic split will enable us to get a sense for, where the one thing might be more interesting than another for one particular group. We won't spend too much time, but we'll share that so that you can get a reflection on it. And then before you know it, we'll be blink and suddenly it's 1:45 and you'll be back on with the rest of your day. But we're going to use this time really efficiently to talk to those top most important things that you feel really need to be addressed. So I'm going to wrap up the voting in a moment. So I'll give you another couple of seconds. So the first is a slightly heavier weight than the second and the third, so the order does matter. I can see that we've just had someone join our session.
That's okay.
So it looks like strategy, risk and resilience has floated to the top, and then people and culture. So we're going to crack into strategy momentarily. Before we do that, though, it's sometimes interesting to look at the difference of demographic splits. So we can see, just to look around the slide, CEOs are represented in the darker blue at the top, then director, corporate secretaries are quite interested in governance. We can see that amongst the director level, artificial intelligence feels like it's important. And the other key one, risk and resilience, is a common thread. So we start to see the difference of perspectives, which is quite interesting. The second thing to look at is, what do we think between Australia, New Zealand, and elsewhere? So because we only have a few from elsewhere, that's why they're strongly represented here. Governance, risk, and resilience is flow top. So we're going to talk to certainly this one. And the rest of us are fairly even in terms of our Australia, New Zealand perspective, a little bit more on governance for Australia, a little bit more on artificial intelligence for the Kiwis. And it's not that anything is right or wrong. It's just, these are just interesting perspectives to have. So let's jump into strategy. And again, I know that you all thought that you were going to rest and chill out through the session, but we crafted some really sticky issues that face us as boards, when we consider strategy. And so here we can see that, again, it's the same drill as before. Your first vote will have a slightly heavier weight than your second and third. And so the first sticky thing, directors outwardly agree but hold divergent interpretation. So, we kind of don't have that clarity, or maybe avoidance of conflict suppresses robust debate. So this is where, we're trying to tease out those challenging choices that we're trying to make. Maybe there's critical gaps in board expertise. Maybe there's around having domain knowledge, or perhaps the execution progress is poorly measured, so we're not having those right measures. Or it could be that there's something else that we haven't. But all of these things are challenging issues, and in a moment we're going to put Julie on the spot, who's faced all of these, I'm sure, and share a couple of insights as to what you believe as a cohort on this session today are the stickiest aspects of strategy. And Sean, if there's any questions that pop up, I look forward to hearing you jump in and share any insights.
Yeah, none yet.
Will do. I'll keep my eyes open.
All right. What's top of mind for you, Julie, when you look at this list? I'll close the voting when we get to close to 80 because that seems to be the larger number. What floats the top in your mind?
Gosh, it differs with every board. But I think the outwardly agreeing and the avoidance of conflict, and the critical gaps, that Dunning-Kruger model
Mm,
of boards that, oh, for those of you, Dunning-Kruger, they plot ability and experience, or perceived ability and experience. And so you get somebody who thinks, oh, this is wonderful, and I've read an article about it, and they believe they know something. And then they get to read a few more articles and they start to realize that there's a whole heap of nuance, and their confidence drops until they realize just how little they know. And
mm,
then they read and they learn and they experience and they go back up. And I love the way they've annotated this lovely curve with the highest point is the peak of Mount Stupid, which is when you still haven't got enough. I know, I couldn't make this up. But the peak of Mount Stupid, then you go down into the valley, the pit of despair, and then you climb up the slope until you reach the plateau of productivity, which is always lower than the peak of Mount Stupid. So
mm.
directors, when we think we know, actually going, well, have I been through the pit of despair? Because if I haven't, I'm probably just overconfident and underexperienced.
So what
Um,
we're seeing here, just to jump in, Julie, and keeping an eye on the time. So immediate pressures outweigh long-term positioning. You must have come across this. This is, floated to the top. Then we can see avoidance of conflict, which was one of the ones you raised up. Maybe, immediate pressures outweigh long-term positioning, the short long-term tension. How does that play out for you? And what are some of the things that you've seen be practically useful to help overcome this challenge, which is a sticky, ugly piece of that governance have to worry about?
yeah, well, the sad fact is that we need to remain solvent, and if we can't remain solvent, we damn well have to go into administration before we start getting into serious trouble for trading whilst insolvent. So yes, I can understand those immediate pressures do need a good and considered response. So I'm not saying don't respond if you've absolutely got to respond. And it's not just insolvency. If you're in the government sector, I was going to say put your hands up and give me a wave in the government sector, but you can pop a wave into the chat. Budgets get cut, and suddenly you have to find a 5% efficiency dividend, or you have to reduce headcount. And it's not that you're going to become insolvent and the board are going to go to jail, but you have to comply. That is the directive that comes to you from your sole shareholder.
Hmm.
Um, for anything else, one of the things I love to do is to say, let's imagine we've solved that. Now, what are the key things? And so you can start to put those long-term things onto the agenda. I love that Stephen Covey plot of urgent versus important,
Right.
and making sure that, yes, you deal with the truly urgent, even if it's not important, but that you constantly have the important on the agenda, and that you make sure that you find the time to address it. And certainly strategic planning, director education, reporting to your stakeholders, and investing in your staff are four of the things that I would put in that really important box. You need to do them.
Before we move off this one, the second was avoidance of conflict suppresses robust debate. What are some things, some tools that you might have brought into boards to help have robust debate and overcome this particular sticky challenge? What would you say?
Certainly, a tool like this one is a great one where you give people a range of options and you can actually get to the decision without having the debate. but it hasn't been suppressed. It's just been neatly bypassed. So that's sort of like building a road around Albury so you don't have to go through all the traffic lights and stuff up the middle of town. And for those of us that don't live in Australia, it's a lovely bypass, and I'm an engineer. But the other things you can do is for particularly the chair. If you are a chair, this is your job. Your job is to make sure that board has good discussions and makes good decisions. Tricks, actually asking people, okay, say what's good about this,
Mm,
and then go round the table and now say what you're worried about. Now
right.
say what are some of the potential underlying weaknesses that we need to address before we can do this. Now say what are some of the strengths that we could apply. And
Mm,
it's that making everybody have a balanced view,
right.
and making people aware that it's not that they're saying we can't do this. They're saying there are issues with doing this, and let's have the conversation before we make the decision, and not de facto drop into a decision because we didn't have a proper conversation.
Right. Super helpful. Thank you so much for that. Which leads us nicely into risk and resilience. Risk and resilience was the second classic area where our group that's joined us today have bumped into. So um, let's see now. Let's look at some of the risk and risky challenges that we are started to be concerned about. So things like, is it cyber vulnerabilities? As we start to say, same drill as before, team. Your first one will be slightly heavier than your second and third. Is it things like climate? Are we acknowledging but we're not really integrating, for example? Or is there some geopolitical exposures that are downplaying in our discussions? Maybe there's risk registers exist, but they lack real ownership, for example. Or maybe there's, a lack of expertise in this. Could be insurance issues. Maybe that could be a challenge. Or maybe there's something more kind of upstream in terms of suppliers or partners, and we're over-reliant on them. This is not an exhaustive list. But as we started to craft thinking, what are some sticky, ugly things that might exist in the risk and resilience challenge? These were the ones that came together when we were crafting the session. So just while we wait for the next 30 or 40 votes to come in, Julie, what was just quickly, the top one that piqued your interest as you looked at this risk and resilience?
Ooh. Um, I really worry about cyber vulnerabilities.
Mm.
Nothing makes me worry more than IT people who tell me not to worry. Uh, that's like really frightening. My response is Harrison Ford response from Air Force One: don't be afraid, be very afraid. Um, but I'm just going to insert a little rule. If you pick J something else, you must type in the chat or in the Q&A what that other thing is.
Mm. Yeah, that's a
Because
great point.
we did our best to come up with a list of options for you, but we're not you. We don't know what you're facing. Um, and there's another 10 to go before Jeremy's going to tick over. Oh no,
Well, I'm just looking at
early.
the time, and you're all going to want to finish on time. So with that, it looks like so the top one, risk registers exist, but they lack real ownership. And then in line with your thinking, cyber vulnerability. So let's talk about risk registers. What's your experience on exactly this issue? They exist, but they lack ownership. How have you overcome such a challenge at a board level, Julie, yeah, what would you say?
Yeah, that's a difficult one because the risk registers themselves are a repository of information that should drive you to other things. And ideally, the people who own those other things should be really aware that this register is going to bring attention to them from above and around, and even from below as people
Mhm.
get access to it. One of the things I find that absolutely undermines real ownership is when the mitigation strategies for the risks wouldn't really work in practice. Nobody's invested in them. Nobody's practiced the actions and the plans that sit behind them. They're not properly resourced,
Mm,
or also where the risk register looks lovely, but because there's pressure from above, risks are always brought down to a moderate level. They're not. There are some risks which are extreme. I have a sneaking feeling risk A, cyber, is much higher than most boards know and want to think about. But if
mm.
you put it down as moderate on your risk register, you're just training people to ignore your registers and think your risk management's all a bit of a furphy.
Right. You already talked a little bit about cyber vulnerabilities. I can see that the third thing that popped up here is there's a second and bottom one. Boards lack resilience, expertise to challenge management. So this is kind of starts to speak to the board management relationship here. How do you see, like, where are some healthy activities to make sure that that dialogue, acknowledging that both the board and government and management have different perspectives on the business. So, what are some healthy things that you've seen which can drive up that ability to have a dialogue? Because it is a dialogue is challenge, but it's a discussion. What have you seen? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, most of us as directors are already out of date. We got to be on boards because we'd already been good as being managers and executives. So, yeah, having the expertise to challenge management who are current and still honing their knowledge is daunting, but it's kind of our job. We've just got to do it. And I find the how questions,
Mm,
asking them, how would you handle this? What exactly would you do? Who would you tell? At what point might you need external resources? What's the process for getting them?
mm,
Those questions that invite the executives to invite you in. You've almost got to be like the vampires in Sinner. You've got to get them to invite you over the threshold, just so that they can then share with you, this is really what we would do, and this is really what we expect to be the result. And to
right.
understand that it's okay for you to be scared and it's okay for you to trust, but your trust must be reasonable. And for that to happen, you've got to have those conversations.
Super. People and culture was the third sticky area, and again, not an exhaustive group list of sticky things, team, but here are some things. So, CEO succession plans. One of the biggest, probably the most important job of the board is choose a CEO. So that's number one. Maybe toxic behaviors at the top go unchallenged. So maybe that becomes a people and culture issue. Board diversity is discussed but not acted upon. So we talk about how we need diverse perspectives, but we don't do anything about it. Burnout and well-being risks are underplayed. It'll be fine. Everyone can work 80-hour weeks. Maybe there's a misalignment around culture, but it hasn't been addressed. Or what about pay and equity issues? That they, we've wake up with a whole raft of one-on-one arrangements and deals, and I think just in the interest of time, I'll finish a little bit early. So don't eat into those sandwiches, Tim. You need to make your choices. Julie, top of mind for you around people and culture. Which one piqued your interest coming into this one?
Um, I think culture misalignment, and
Mm,
sometimes it's not even seen because the board don't get out there and experience the culture in action.
right.
So I worry about that one. Um, I worry about the succession plans. They're often fine for the CEO going on holiday, but if the CEO got hit by a bus or eaten by a great white shark, they just might not work. And the board diversity, actually having that discussion about what sort of diversity do we need, and how uncomfortable would that be for us to bring that diversity into this room with
Mm,
us? Um, that doesn't always happen. It's very often more, well, we've got to have a lawyer and we've got to have an accountant. And Oh, look at that CEO succession. Wow.
So what are some good steps that you've seen to make sure that the CEO succession plans are solid? That what would be maybe, oh, let me just get rid of that. Okay.
Well, I
Um,
was enjoying Energy Cloud for Windows. Thank you very much for
I know.
asking.
Thank you,
Um,
Matt. Let me get rid of that off the screen. Okay, so coming back to CEO succession plans, yeah, what are some actions that you've seen that's been good?
I think the first thing is, yeah, boards aren't supposed to be comfortable places. If you are a little not-for-profit or a very efficient government enterprise, you probably don't have budget to have a CEO in waiting sitting in your executive team,
Right.
able to just step up into that role. You might have some people who would be good CEOs in waiting in a few years' time, and you're investing in developing them. But if one of them steps up for more than just a holiday period, you're going to need to bring in external help, maybe some interim support in the role they've left. The board's going to have to be more active in their mentoring. Your CEO succession plan doesn't have to be like, oh, well, if A left, B would step up and we'd carry on like nothing happened. It's like, you've got to be kidding me.
Mm,
You don't replace people. People are unique and irreplaceable. You only fill the gap they leave, so that you need to be thinking about, well, if this CEO goes and this replacement steps up into the gap, here are the extra things we get with that new person, but
mm,
here are the things that we used to have with the previous person that we've got to backfill from somewhere else. So the
right.
role design has to flex a little, the support has to flex. Maybe your delegations have to be reduced until the new person has proved themselves capable, which means the board has to step up. But when I see a CEO succession plan and it looks easy and simple, or when I'm dealing with a small listed mining company that says, oh, well, if we lost our CEO, we'd have to recruit externally. It's like, okay, that can take up to 3 to 6 months because anybody good possibly might be working, possibly might have a notice period or a non-compete period, possibly might want a holiday before they started with you. What's your plan for getting across that gap in time? It's not just gaps in skill. So that I think is enough to get you started. And there are some great headhunters and other consultants out there to help you get all the way to having a plan that you think you can rely on.
Now, you mentioned earlier about culture misalignment, but I just want to draw attention to the third one, burnout and well-being risks are underplayed.
Yeah.
Is that how, again, just before we leave this slide, what are some classic strategies that you've seen to help us tackle this particular issue, burnout and well-being risks being underplayed? What would you say?
Yeah, I'm just going to pick up on Gemma's comment in the chat.
Yep.
Um, worry about money is something that if you've got any burnout happening, concerns about financial viability, concerns about the ability to get your pay rise so that you can keep up with the cost of living. I know if it keeps rising any further, we won't be able to see it, let alone afford it.
Mm,
But underplaying those risks is dangerous because then something goes bang. When your normally affable CEO suddenly snaps at somebody. So just thinking through, and sometimes naming the elephant is also taming the elephant. When you
right.
tell people, I know this is a huge ask, we really appreciate it. But be real about things. As directors, there's a lot of directors on the call. Do not send people questions at 10 o'clock at night without underneath saying, I've sent this when it suited me in my spare time. You don't need to answer until it's your work time. Just the
Yes.
fact that I'm on your board doesn't mean everything I ask is urgent. In fact, some of it will be stupid. So don't treat it as urgent. Of course it will.
Nice.
Yeah, 90% of the time I'm not stupid, but every so often. Um, and that goes for all of us. So again, addressing the burnout, doing what you can, treating people with respect. And if you see somebody looking different to how they normally look, have that "are you okay" conversation.
Right.
I know it's uncomfortable. I'm an engineer. I wish there was a numerical answer for all this. But actually saying to someone, look, you look really stressed. And I noticed that you were a bit short when you answered that question in the meeting. How are you going?
Mm.
And if
Yeah, so
they
true.
say, oh, I'm good, and you think, no, you're not, actually saying, really? Do you have time for a coffee?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right,
Crucial.
Julie. I think it's the burden's on us to create that space, isn't it, as
Yeah.
leaders? And so I've jumped into, it was a great segue to come into governance in general. So governance was the fourth thing, and here are some sticky things, not an exhaustive list, but directors lack clarity in their true role. Um, One of the things I do with a wonderful organisation in New Zealand is I work with school principals with the Springboard Trust, and one of the classic things that I find as a tension is around school principals working with their boards. And, sometimes people jump onto a board because they believe their job is to tell the principal what to do. Whereas, of course, then you've how to figure out that dynamic. So we can see directors lack clarity as one of the sticky things. How about compliance overshadows? So sometimes, we can be just so compliance driven because we're worried about, all of the responsibilities and so on that comes with being in governance. Maybe it's around succession. We talked a little bit about that with CEOs, so maybe that's a classic issue. Um, Perhaps our reporting needs to be improved. Diversity, again, we mentioned this diversity of thoughts and ideas. How do we, if we think that we can just bring diversity by bringing a particular demographic or someone from a particular area, is it really diversity, or do we need to, and make sure that we're bringing fresh thinking as part of all of that? Um, Maybe underperformance. Maybe that's a key sticky thing that needs to be navigated, or coming back, the chair dominates, limiting balanced participation. And to your point around, getting the real things out on the table, that's why I find, this technique of using this kind of interactive technology is quite helpful, because you can say, I call them the unspeakable things, and then we can see whether they would in fact be an issue. So as we wait for the last couple of votes to come in, what was top of mind for you on this board governance? What's the number one thing you see, Julie? And I'll wrap this up in a few moments.
Um, I find all of these, and it's that question of which one is most important for this board. And is that because it's important or just because it's become urgent because it's preventing us from being able to do a good job with something? So thinking through in terms of the long ones, the board succession, and yeah, directors who don't know what they're doing. And Dunning-Kruger applies here too, doesn't it? They
Mm,
think they know, or they'll say things like, I was elected, therefore I know everything I need to know because I know enough to get elected.
right.
So yeah, that whole question of this is what got you the job.
Hmm.
But what's going to keep you the job is this minimum standard of director. And then what's going to make you excel in the job so that the company thrives is this extra standard of director skill and capability. And
Right.
so having that conversation, and if you want your board to know what their role is, instead of complaining about them, actually educate them. If it's important, invest in it. And it doesn't mean you have to spend money, but tell them you want them to watch a free webinar from one of the ones that's on the website and to report back to the next board meeting. I watched this one. This is why I thought it was relevant to this board. And these are two big ideas that I picked from it. Just that conversation going around the table. Yeah, it's
Mm,
going to take time, but it's really going to supercharge you later. It's cost you zero and it's woken the board up. So I
Awesome.
find that one is a good one. And compliance, you've just got to get so efficient because ideally, as a director, all you want is one indicator that says we comply with everything we need to comply with. And then you can go back to the strategy stuff.
Right.
I know that's Pollyanna-ish, and you actually need lots more because you want the nuance to really understand and where are we choosing to exceed our requirements because there's benefit in it for us, where are
Mm,
we choosing to meet them comfortably, and where are we struggling to meet them and it's uncomfortable because we've got to address that. It's starting to become urgent, even if it's not important.
mm. Really nice. Nice. You've touched on all of these. I'm going to jump back. I'm keeping an eye on time. Um, I think artificial intelligence has floated to the next one. We've probably got enough time to crack on this and then crack into our summary. So, which of these board AI challenges? AI, and my friends tell me that I'm an AI denier. I call myself an AI skeptic, but nevertheless, it's a rabbit hole that we could tumble down. Which of these challenges are most sticky for us in this group? Is it around understanding of AI's capabilities or limits? Is it the risk appetite? Things like ethical implications? Are we being over reliant on management, so we're not really, bringing our own perspectives to the party because we don't have the skills, maybe, which talks to the literacy. Is it treated as hype, not a strategy? Or maybe is it, potential of reputational damage for some kind of AI misuse? Which are the ugly things that are top of mind? And while we wait for the next few votes to come in, Julie, what's the number one top of thing for you, top of mind item for you around artificial intelligence as it stands today?
I think with AI as it stands today, I am quite happy to admit I'm down the bottom of that peak of a pit of despair. Um, I've done a few courses on AI for directorship. Um, I've done a few courses on understanding and using AI, but understanding what it's really capable of and where it's getting the information it's giving me. I was talking with one of my mentees the other day. She had applied for a board role and she popped her CV into an AI and said, this is the role I'm applying for. Here's my CV. Please suggest a text for a good cover letter. And
Mm,
in her cover letter, it came out with, well, in my experience as CFO of this company. And she went, I never worked there. And I went, yeah, but the guy who was CFO of that company has possibly applied for this job. So understanding, and you cannot read the terms and conditions. They're too long and they're too complicated, and you can't really think through what they really mean in practice. But be cautious. It's like jumping onto a powerful horse.
mm,
You might know how to ride, but you don't know this horse, and you don't know what it's going to be startled by and what it's just going to trot happily past. So I'd be careful of that. And I think that's strongly linked to the ability to ask questions and that ability to say, look, I don't really know enough about this, but here's a question. Um, Asking permission to take things offline, having the conversations, and getting that risk appetite, actually telling staff, this is the sort of thing we don't want you to do. Would have been nice if they'd thought about that before Robodebt. But yeah, it's hard. And if it weren't AI, it would be something else. And I think as well, don't leap just at AI. If you haven't got your data and information governance right, you cannot possibly do well with AI.
mm.
And most of us, if we are honest, we don't have databases. We don't even have data lakes. We have data dumps. They are sludgy swamps with the occasional nugget of useful stuff. And so,
Nice.
no matter how good your AI, if that's what it's using, the garbage in, garbage out approach is a very wise one.
Now, Sean, I want to respect your time, so I'm going to. So we've now covered off strategy, risk and resilience, people and culture, governance, artificial intelligence. These floated to the top of this group, and I think we'll now just jump into the summary so we can keep everyone on time for the next meetings. We thought, as this is the first time we've run such an interactive discussion and to harvest that group wisdom of this cohort, the question that we wanted to put in here is, after how many months should we rerun this session? Because the world changes quite quickly, but maybe not that quickly. So is it after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4, 5, 6? Is it kind of twice a year kind of thing? Is it 4 times a year? What would you say, dear colleagues on the call, would be, and this is, you just choose one of these, and then that will be good guidance for us as we think about, preparing for the next session when we run such an interactive session. How fast do you think the world is changing, Julie? What do you think is going to float to the top as being the logical amount of time for us as a battle rhythm to have these chats?
I really don't know. I mean, I am a governance junkie, so I am already in my mind thinking how excited I'm going to be to read the 2 different Otter AI summaries. And again, anyone who wants to look, there's 2 people have put summaries in the chat, and the summaries are actually slightly different because even though they're using the same AI platform, it has chosen, based on its experience of what those people have liked in the past, to highlight or downplay certain areas. So I think having the information to know how am I impacting the speed with which things come up and what am I doing here? I think just really think through, and I've been completely distracted by the fact that 52% of you want it at 6 monthly intervals, and 26 at 3 months, which I think is good. But yeah, in 6 months, you've got time for things to really change. You have to ask yourself, how strategic am I being if I need to refresh every 3 or 2 months? And Sean is giving me a big nudge and saying, Julie, get out of the data, and not saying goodbye. So thank you so much. This has been a really fun session.
Thanks. I have cut you both off. My apologies for that, but we are over time by a few minutes and I am respectful of people's time. So thanks very much. So please feel free to connect with our presenters on LinkedIn today, everybody. I'm sure they'll look forward to your connection. If you'd like to be put in touch with Julie or Jeremy, please indicate your interests on the survey at the end of the webinar as you exit. And you will receive an email from me tomorrow, which will include, hopefully, because the recording stopped, and I'm not sure what happened there, but hopefully it'll include a recording of today's webinar, along with the slides, the transcript, and the report from today's session. So as you leave the webinar, don't forget to complete our really short 1-minute survey, go into the draw for our beautiful gift hamper. I'll announce the winner for that tomorrow as well. Thank you again for your attendance, everybody, over the last 45 minutes. I hope you enjoyed this session with Jeremy and Julie. I know I did. Thank you very much for the both of you. I look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar, everybody. Have a great day.